Alright, so let's take a look at this practice proof. Now in class, we're actually going to do one that we've already talked about in class, but we haven't actually proven this statement. So it's one of the reasons that we listed in our notebooks, and it says this one. If two angles are supplements of a third angle, those two angles are the same. Okay, so the if parts are given. If angle 1 and 5 are supplementary, so if these two guys are supplementary, so you should know that means they add up to 180. And at the same time, if 3 and 5 are supplementary, so these two guys should also be supplementary. So that's the given. And the prove is, if we know all that, prove that these two are the same. These are congruent. Okay? Alright, so let's take a look at what we have here. Well, might as well start out with what we know for sure, and that's the givens here. So angle 1 and angle 5 are supplementary, and angle 3 and angle 5 are supplementary. So I'm going to say that's given. Okay. And then I'm even going to cross these off up here because now I know I've used them both, so I don't have to worry about them anymore. Okay. The next step says they give you a little bit for it. 1 and 5 equal 180 when you add them. Okay, well, how do we know that? Okay. Well, look at this line right here. 1 plus 5 are supplementary. So then you can say 1 plus 5 equals 180. Right? Well, if we go back to our list of reasons that we had from, over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, one of them is this one. Definition of supplementary angles. And that says two things. One of the things it says is if the sum of two angles is 180, then you can call the angles supplementary. The other one says if you already know you have supplementary angles, then the sum is 180. Right? Well, in this case, we're dealing with this one. Right? I already have my supplementary angles in step 1, so I can say that the sum has to be 180 because of step 2. Okay? Or in step 2, not because of step 2. So I can now say that these are linked, right? This one leads to this one because that's the definition of supplementary angles. Now, some people might be wondering, why isn't it an angle addition postulate? Because we've done some where you add two angles like these and they equal 180, right? Two little angles equal the big angle. Well, if you remember what the angle addition postulate says, it says that it's got to be two angles that are next to each other, adjacent angles. And adjacent means next to, so like these two angles, and they have to share a vertex. They have to share a corner. Well, if you look at these two examples here, here's angle 1's corner, here's angle 5's corner. So they are not adjacent angles, so you can't use the angle addition postulate. Okay, well, now let's look at the other, because there's a blank here. Right? So the blank one is right here, and we need to somehow match this up with it the same way that we matched up the yellow ones. So we can. Let's just follow the same pattern. M3 plus M5 equals 180. Okay, so now we got that. Let me get rid of the highlighting for a minute. Okay. So, if we look at step 3, it says M1 plus M5 equals M3 plus M5. And somehow we got to that step. Well, if you look at step 2, right, we've got that M1 and M5 equals 180. And then in the next step, I have that 3 and 5 also equals 180. Well, that means that anywhere that there's a 180, I can plug in 3 plus 5, which is what I'm going to do to get to step 3. If you look at step 3, it says that 1 plus 5 equals 3 plus 5. So really all I'm doing is plugging in this yellow box for that yellow box. And when I plug in, it's called substitution. Okay. Next one here. Okay, so I've got substitution now. The next step, they give you the reason here is reflexive. Now when we've been using reflexive, it's either so we can add in the same thing to both sides of a step, or we can subtract out the same thing from both sides of a step. I don't think we've used it where we multiply yet, but we could. Now in this case, if you look at step 3, I've got an angle 5 on each side of the equal sign. I've got one over here, and then I got one over here. So really, and when you look at step 5, those are now gone, those 5s, those angle 5s. So the goal is to get rid of them. Now before you're allowed to subtract them out in a geometry proof, you have to say the 5 you're going to get rid of on this side is the same as the 5 you're going to get rid of on that side. That's the reflexive step. And then we can get rid of them in step 5. So when we get rid of them, really what we're doing is we're doing step 3 minus step 4 gives me step 5. So this one is going to be a subtraction step. And what you might want to do is you might even want to write a note saying step 3 minus step 4 equals step 5. Right? Now there's a blank spot here. Remember, another way of writing m1 equals m3, that refers to the degrees. That's the same type of statement. It's equivalent to saying that 1 and 3, the angles themselves, are congruent. And if you look at the way that we're supposed to prove this, what we're actually aiming to prove, it says this, 1's congruent to 3. So it makes sense that we should probably write it that way as well at the end. Okay, hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, well, give it another try. Watch it one more time.